everyone, this is Sarah, Painty Creator. So as you can see, I'm working on some A4 paper today. My usual Creative Peak watercolour paper that I use an awful lot. It's really good quality for the price. And whilst we're learning, that's the best thing to do, is to get some mileage under your brush. I'm also using my Cotman watercolour paints and my Meaden mop brushes a lot. Probably use some other brushes, but it is what it is. So I've given my paints a little spritz with my spritzer bottle, and I'm going to just give my paper a little spritz, and we're going to Paris today on a bit of a grey rainy day in Paris. So I'm starting off with some cerulean blue and some Payne's grey, and I'm just going to put plenty of water in there, and I'm just going to drop in some of that into the background. Plenty of water. A little bit more grey, I think, into there. I'm just creating some atmosphere for our painting. It was just clean water going in. So this is going to be a building on this side, and I'm just toning over the paper. We can paint over it. And whilst it's damp, I'm going to scrunch up a paper towel, and I'm going to lift out some light lighter patches. It'll soften back. A nice way of just getting a little bit of contrast on there. And we're keeping things soft. So it's toned the paper nicely. I've got a nice gentle gradient. Just going to give it another spritz just to keep everything going and moving. Well, that cerulean blue and that Payne's grey have worked really well to just tone the paper. I'm just checking the edges because sometimes I miss some. So guess what, we're going to wait for that to dry. I'm going to wait for it to dry naturally for a little while, and then I will finish it off with a hairdryer. So I'll see you in a bit. Hello, so I'm back. I have cleaned my camera, so hopefully you can see a little better, but so I've got the lighter part here. It's dry. I have finished it off with my hairdryer, and it always does make it buckle ever so slightly. If you wanted it to lie flatter, then I would suggest that you leave it to dry naturally, and it will go back flatter. So I'm now going to mix up a a bluey green basically. So I'm going to use some Hooker's green, a little bit of Payne's grey just for the colour harmony today, and some cerulean blue. Might need a bit more green into there because it looks a bit blue. So a little bit more Hooker's green. I'm just wanting a bluey greeny colour. If I find a little scrap of paper, I'm wanting that sort of distant greeny grey colour. That's a better colour. So I just added a little bit more Payne's grey. So I'm going to just put some distant trees in. As if they're growing under the arch of the Arc de Triomphe, of the Eiffel Tower, sorry. Where am I at? And I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of yellow ochre into there. So here we are. It's made a much greener but still muted colour. A little bit more cerulean blue into there, and some yellow ochre. A little bit more water in that mix. We don't need it to be too obvious that it's there. I'm just going to add a little bit of Payne's grey into the mix. Tiny bit more. Just painting round where these people are. A little hint of cerulean blue in there. I'm going to add some more water. Remember, it will dry about 10% lighter because we're going wet on to dry. A tiny bit of yellow ochre in there. So those are going to be the distant trees. And give those a little bit of a spritz. Just as they're drying, it just encourages a little bit of texture in there. And then I'm going to leave those alone and let that texture come. Might just put a few very distant trees in this background as well. So that was just basically the same colour but lots of water. So whilst these are drying, I can paint this building. It's quite a wet, murky day, so I'm going to go for some cerulean blue, Payne's grey, a bit of Payne's Grey in quite a watery mix. Here's my little swatch card. It's quite watery, it moves a little bit. I'm wanting just to tone the building, and I'm going to try and use some of the light off the side of the building as well. So I'm working with a wet wash, building up the building to the left hand side of the Eiffel Tower. Just going to add a little bit more Payne's Grey into this wash now. Trying to keep my brush strokes the same direction. Negatively painting around that lamp because I want to maintain that undertone there. A little bit more Payne's Grey into that mix. And cerulean blue, I'm running out, same again. Payne's Grey, cerulean blue. I should have done a little bit more. So I'm just going to go back in and put some darker windows in. So adding some more Payne's Grey into this mix, and I'm going to go round this umbrella as best I can. I wasn't designed to paint carefully, I don't think. So this is the canopy on the building. Oops. And then a little bit more cerulean blue and Payne's Grey into this background. Okay, so we've got the outline of a building. So whilst it's, I'm just going to put some of this street colour on. So just taking a little bit of time to make sure I get my perspective right. to let that dry. Okay, so here we are, we're back and we're dry. Not sure this bit needed to be there, but we'll see. So I'm going to do these two umbrellas next. So I've just swapped onto my smaller mop brush, and for this umbrella I'm going to use some vermilion red and some red light mix. I want it really bright, really clearly red. If you haven't got some vermilion, then just use whatever's on your palette. Because that line goes up there, I'm just going to extend my umbrella a little bit. Now I want it to be loose still, and that's always a bit of a challenge because you need the information, so you need the detail, but you don't need too much careful painting, and that's always a bit of a challenge. Well, it is for me, might not be for you. So first layer of red is on. I should have been a bit more careful about that, but never mind, we'll make do. And I'm going to do this one quite a bright, cool yellow. So I want the contrast of the colours. So this is Hansa yellow. Or you could use lemon yellow or whatever you want, really. So they're the first layers of those colours. I shall have a play with those later. So whilst they're drying, we can go up to our Eiffel Tower. I'm going to carry on using my small mop brush. So cerulean blue and some red light mixed together just to grey down that blue. If you haven't got red light, try a little bit of burnt sienna, and we're going to try and keep our strokes loose. And just building up some of that tonal value on the base of the Eiffel Tower. I'm just mixing it a little bit more. So a bit of a darker grey. Oops. There we go. So that's just cerulean blue and the red light. Carefully cutting around the space. It is just that base painting. So we're trying to just get that colour on. So we are going to come back in with our darker colours in a little while, but I'm just taking my plastic card and I'm just going to scratch some of the ironwork across, and then put some. And as always, if you've not managed to catch this while it's too dry, just give it a squirt with this mister bottle. If that's too dry, we're going to give it a squish with the mister bottle. Give it a minute or two, and it will start to be able to lift again. If you haven't managed to catch it, we can always go back in and put it on with some but it's a really good way of getting texture. Okay, so I'm going to leave that to dry and come back down to my red umbrella. So I'm just taking a red light mix now, probably about 50% water, 50% paint, and I'm just starting to think about where some of that shadow and highlight come in my umbrella. Okay, wash my brush out well. Same again with my yellow. I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of red light into that yellow, just to make it slightly different colour. Okay, so now I'm going to mix up the darks for my people. So I'm going to use some ultramarine and some raw umber, sorry, burnt umber, sorry. and that makes like a bluey grey colour. Where's my little swatch? So it makes a dark, really nice dark. We might have to put a bit more depth in the dark. And I'm just leaving a little gap under the umbrella for this person. I'm just going to add a little bit of Payne's Grey now into this so that I can vary the shadows. So that's one person. I'm just taking a little bit of that yellow that I had and I'm just going to drop it in. So it's quite watery. If I put it back on the till, it'll just let that yellow run down a little bit in the shadow of the person. Okay, so this next one, I might just put a little bit more Payne's Grey in there. It's not dark enough yet for me. So then the next pair over here, I want them to be dark but look different. So I've put some ultramarine into here. I'm just touching on a paper towel. And I'm just going to paint this person really loose. A little bit of burnt sienna. A touch of that dark in there, just for a different. So there's one person, and then I'm going to connect the two. So use the same burnt sienna and that dark mix. Oh, another head. And a little bit of a dark mix for a doggo, if you want one. And load up. I'll put the lid on after. Oh, a little bit more. Sorry, that's my hubby. going for a nice dark mix. Payne's grey, ultramarine blue, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna as well in there for this person that's going to be under this red, so that's why I put the burnt sienna in, because as it dries, here we go, as it dries you'll see that the red will come out. Coat. So a little bit more ultramarine blue into that mix. And then just like we did dropping the yellow in here, we're going to drop some of that red mix into this shadow. Plenty of water. Drop a little bit more ultramarine into here. So we need to now drop some reflections of these people into the wet puddle. So I'm just picking up some of my dark. Spritz the bottle. I'll just encourage it to go down a little bit more. Connect that. Just run some water across. So I'm going to put some really wet reflections across here as well. Just turning those off. So the last things I need to do are these lampposts. So I'm just going to go for my number 4 round for now, and I'm going straight in with Payne's grey. Quite a thick mixture to do the What's the daisy? The length on that figure. The same with this one. A little bit thicker because it's nearer. More pronounced. I'm trying to stay loose, not get overly worried. Okay, so I'm going to pick up some of this yellow again. I'm just going to drop in a tiny bit of still a Payne's grey in that, so we didn't get a very good yellow. So a little bit of the same yellow for those street lamps. I'm just going to drop a little tiny bit of orange tone in there, just so it adds a little bit of warmth. I might just drop a little bit of that orange tone. So that's just cadmium orange. And we're going to put the reflection in. I'm going back to my small round mop brush for the reflection. Plenty of water. So join the reflection onto and drop it in. Always join the reflection onto the base of whatever you're reflecting, and then it feels like it's connected. Just loading a little bit of whatever's dark's on. So we're nearly there. Nice loose interpretation. So I'm going to do the darks for here. So I've got ultramarine and burnt umber. Makes a really nice sort of grey blue colour. Let's have a look. And because it's got ultramarine in, it will separate out nicely. So I'm just putting that shadow. on there and up this side. A little bit across. Nice bit of dry brush work. So just emphasising some of those marks that we made, not being overly precious about them. So I'm going to grab my Dr. Martens bleed proof white now and a small number 0 brush. Just dropping some clean water into my Dr. Martens. Get a nice thick paste. It's really good. There's Dr. Martens, and those of you that watch know that I quite often use my lid as a paint palette. So I'm going to put some highlights across here. Remember, we're not painting straight lines. We're just creating a little bit of interest and texture. Out there, I'm just going to wash it out with some clean water and just rub some of that away. As it dries, it'll go in. Oops, a daisy. There you go. Where else do I want some? I think I'll put a little bit on here. Just to help it stand out. And the same on here. Just put a little bit in. So let me see about this yellow umbrella. That just brings that little yellow umbrella to life. And we can add similarly onto here because it's So whilst it's still wet, just soften off some of those. So you're almost painting with water, softening it in. Okay, so I just want to drop a few more lines probably down this edge of the pavement. Maybe on the edge of this shop front. So I'm going to put back on this flagpole that I lost while I was painting. Done quite well at keeping hold of some of those lights in there. So some red, white and blue time. So I'm going to use some phthalo blue for the blue on the French flag with some ultramarine in, because I want the blue to stand out from this cerulean blue base, and the phthalo blue's got a little greeny sort of tinge to it, and that should hold the colour nicely. So then I need my white from my Dr. Martens next. And then a nice red. And I'm going to use a red that is a red light and vermilion red, so it goes with this red. Just going to put some of that red onto this umbrella because I really want it red. So just going to add some burnt umber into that mix to make it a dark. Touch my paper towel, and then I'm just going to put that flagpole on. There we go. So if anybody's in doubt, we're in Paris. We are in Paris on a wet, rainy day. So I hope you've enjoyed that little trip into Paris on a wet day, and why not give it a try? I might just darken their heads a little bit. Bit of burnt sienna. Maybe a glaze of some Payne's grey. But what I don't want is for all of the silhouettes to look the same. Okay, I'm going to start fiddling. You could put a little bit more darks on here. If you want. But I think I'm going to call that a day. So I hope you've enjoyed that. A little paint through Paris. We're under an hour. So that's where we're at. Let's see if I can just zoom in a little bit. So you can see where we're at. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and drop me a comment, because I love comments, because that keeps me going. As you may know, I'm a disabled artist who just paints for fun. We're also painting together on Zoom. So if you would like to join any of the Zoom paints, and all we ask is that if you can afford to help out and pay for a little bit, then you do, and if you can't, that's fine. You're more than welcome to join us as we paint together. So if you'd like that Zoom link, do get in touch. Drop me an email and I can send you the next Zoom link. I think we're off to the Netherlands. We're going to paint some Dutch windmills this week. So whenever you meet this, I'm quite sure we'll be doing some Zoom painting. So you're more than welcome to come along for the adventure. See you soon. Bye bye.